I'm Nick Scott. I'm going to kick off. I'll introduce or be introduced in a minute, but let's start by introducing and inviting a missing participant to this session. So this is ChatGPT, and I'm writing a message to ChatGPT. I'll read through it quickly for you. The message goes, "Hello, act as a consultant and trainer with a specialism in digital and AI. You are working alongside me, Nick Scott, to run a 1-hour online webinar for the community of the International Science Council, the ISC. Here is some relevant background information. The invite to this webinar promised that this session would be a practical workshop and safe space for experimentation. We will focus on the most popular generative AI tool, ChatGPT, but also we'll see a few others. We will discuss what makes for an effective prompt, the technical capabilities and limitations of ChatGPT, and answer practical questions. Our aim is to provide support for people already using ChatGPT or those who are interested in using it so that they can do it properly and safely. Importantly, we expected less than 50 people to sign up, but have hundreds who have said they'll attend. As a result, we're asking participants to use the chat to make comments and the Q&A's functionality to ask questions. International Science Council staff Secretariat staff will moderate. Even though tools like ChatGPT could have a wider impact on science, this workshop will not cover those. The ISC's think tank, the Centre for Science Futures, is working on those bigger questions about the impact of AI in science. So the webinar is live now, and I'm sharing my screen so that everyone can see you. Please keep your responses short throughout the conversation as I'm reading out everything that you say. ChatGPT, can you please introduce yourself to the room? Click send, and ChatGPT starts responding. Hello, everyone. I'm ChatGPT, an AI language model developed by OpenAI. I'm here to assist you as a consultant and trainer specializing in digital and AI technologies. Today, we'll be diving into the world of generative AI tools with a particular focus on ChatGPT. Our goal is to explore effective prompts, technical capabilities, limitations, and address any practical questions you may have. Remember, the purpose of this workshop is to ensure that you can use ChatGPT safely and responsibly. Let's make this a collaborative and interactive session by utilizing the chat for comments and the QA feature for questions. ISC Secretariat staff will be moderating the discussion. Please feel free to engage, and let's get started. So what you've seen here is the first interaction, the starting point for a conversation with ChatGPT. This is the start of the whole thread that we will have. But before we go any further, I just want to ask one thing of you, which is I want to ask you in a poll, how regularly have you used ChatGPT in the past? Okay, we're getting all the results, and it looks like about 65% of people have used ChatGPT before, about 15% have played with it once, 30% a few times, and only about 16%, and 15% regularly. So I'll end that poll. And let's tell and share those results for you. You can see those up on your screen. But let's tell ChatGPT about that. Let's go back to this screen and tell ChatGPT what's happened. Before we start, I want to let you know, in a poll of participants, around 65% said they'd used ChatGPT before. Thanks for sharing that information, Nick. It's great to know that a significant portion of the participants have had prior experience. This will provide a diverse range of perspectives and insights. For those who are new to ChatGPT, we'll ensure that the content covers the necessary foundations while also addressing the needs of more experienced users. Let's continue. And I think that's a very good idea. However, and I should also say at this point, if you want to play along, ChatGPT, we can put the link in the chat room. You can open it up and have a play along as we go. However, you will also receive all of this, all of the prompts and all of the information after, so that you should be able to use it for yourself. I've just realized that I've made a bad mistake as a presenter. I haven't introduced myself. Luckily, we have someone here who can do it in ChatGPT. So I've forgotten to introduce myself. ChatGPT, could you do me the favor? Of course, Nick. Allow me to introduce Nick Scott, an esteemed professional in the field of digital and AI technologies. He has extensive background in this domain, having worked with various organizations and projects that have leveraged the power of emerging technologies. Throughout his career, Nick has focused on the practical implementation and utilization of AI, ensuring this is not true. ChatGPT, are you sure about this? Nick has only recently started working in AI. Let's see what ChatGPT has to say. Oh, apologize. Oh, it's giving more information, but it's also fake. Okay, here we have our first lesson about ChatGPT. ChatGPT is set up by default to be eager to please. And if you ask it information about something that it can't search the internet for, and it can't search the internet in its default model, it will make things up. And it has made up a biography of me. So let's see this same question, but in a different model. Let's go to Bing AI. Bing AI is the same underlying technology as ChatGPT. It uses OpenAI's technology, which called GPT-4, run by Microsoft, but it does have access to the internet. So let's ask Bing AI, please, can you write a short biography of Nick Scott? Let's see what Bing AI says in response to that. It's searching for Nick Scott. So it's gone to the internet. It's not using its own data that it holds. It's gone to the internet to find Nick Scott's. And, oh, I'm a professional American football player. I was born in 1995. Yes, I've gained lots of time on myself. This is brilliant. I'm really pleased about this. I always wanted to be an American football player and be younger than I am now. Okay, obviously this is wrong. No, I mean the Nick Scott who worked at MSF. So here you're seeing Bing AI in work as a search engine, but a search engine with intelligence, a search engine that not only does a search, but it captures the information from that search and summarizes it. So hopefully what you'll see here is Bing AI find me, because with the extra word of MSF, it should find the right one. Here I am. I'm a digital consultant who helps nonprofits realize a transformative vision of what they could be in the digital age. I was head of digital and Médicos Sin Fronteras, MSF, Doctors Without Borders in Barcelona for 4 years. I was involved in many innovative projects, including the What Type of MSF Worker Could You Be campaign. I left MSF in 2023, so that's false information. That was actually 2021. It's made up an assertion that it is wrong, to pursue an executive MBA at Asade and to work as a freelance consultant for charities and digital through Zoe Amar Digital. So it is much closer to the truth now. However, it is still false. The key thing I want to take is you take away from this is one of the key mistakes people make when they first start using these technologies is they assume that they are search engines, and they are not search engines. That is not their main function. Their main function is to actually interact with the content that you provide. That's where they work best, not in finding content. However, there are ways to help them find content and to use them alongside search engines. Even with Bing AI, you're getting a much better set of information. Before I go, I want to show you one more tool, and to do that, I just need to turn on VPN because it is not available in Spain where I live. So I'll just connect to Detroit, and then I'm going to show you one more tool, which is Bard. Bard is Google's ChatGPT, full version of ChatGPT. And the thing about Bard is that it also has access to the internet. So please, can you write a biography of Nick Scott, who worked at MSF. Let's see what Bard comes up with. So having a think, there are 2 Nick Scotts who worked at MSF. The first is a bodybuilder and motivational speaker who lost the use of his legs in a car accident. He has no affiliation with MSF, despite it saying there was a Nick Scott that worked at MSF. The second is a managing director, an independent diplomat, an NGO that works on conflict resolution and peace building. Here you're learning something about Bard. In my experience, Bard isn't very good. And that's why today we'll mainly be using ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is by far the best of the models that seem to be on the market at the moment. I'm sure that over time, BitBard will improve, but right now, Bard's the quality and the quality of Bard's responses and the level of hallucination. Hallucination is when it makes things up in terms and to please you. That level is very high with Bard. So, having done that, I'm going to turn off VPN and go back to ChatGPT. And here we have our conversation. Now, so we've done an introduction. We've introduced our conversation, and we've seen a couple of the other tools that are similar to ChatGPT. What I'd like to do now is quickly stop sharing, and just so I can restart sharing with the full screen. One sec. Share my full screen, and I want to use this opportunity to quickly dissect the conversation we've had so far and some of the learnings. So, first thing I want to show you is right at the top. What was the first thing I did? The first thing I did was to give ChatGPT a role, act as a consultant and trainer with a specialism in digital and AI. Why did I do that? I did that because ChatGPT is built on a big data store of text. And by telling it a role to take, it tells it what part of its knowledge to access and how to respond in a way that is in keeping and consistent with the kind of response you want. I want the response that a consultant would make, not the response that a marketer would make, which might be quite different. So roles, tell ChatGPT what role to play. That's a key tip to take away. The second thing I've done is I've given it a huge amount of context. I've told it content and background information that it has used in its response. It has reworked that content and used it in its response. In the conversation, as it continues, that conversation would continue to take that content and use it as part of the context for its answers. It is really important to provide a lot of content to help it find the right answers and avoid it making things up. The third thing I've done is conversation. I have iterated with it and talked to it. Now, the way I did that was when I asked for it my biography, it gave me a biography. I asked it to look again, and it still gave me a false biography because it still didn't have the context to give me the right biography. But if I was talking about something that a lot has been written about, and sadly not enough has been written about me, I'm not that big in its data model. But if I was writing about concepts, about aspects of science, other things, there would be a lot more in there that is actually very, very valid and viable content it would provide. So what else have I done? I have focused on something that I actually, so let me just make this smaller. I provided focus. So when you're using these models, focus on something that you're an expert in. That way you can see whether it's right. You can see whether it's right or wrong in its responses. So use it as a partner to you in your area of expertise. You bring your expertise, it brings ideas, opinions, ways of looking at it, different models for looking at it. And one of the things you're going to do when you're doing that is analyzing its responses, identify the weak and strong points in its responses, and tell it. So I could tell it, if I told it now at the bottom, sorry, you've not made up information, it would say, I'm really sorry, I do not actually have access to the internet, so that's why I've made information up. Be polite. No one really understands why, but you'll see in my first message, I say, can you please introduce yourself into the room? Apparently, being polite gives you better responses. It gives you higher quality responses. Be engaging and friendly. I don't understand why that happens, but it's true. What's the other thing? Sorry, and guide. The final point is guiding it. I tell it at the end exactly what I want it to do. In this case, I want it to introduce itself to the room. In the next case, I want it to introduce me. So I'm being very specific about what I want it to do. Tell it what you want it to do. Now, we've also seen some things in this conversation so far that are worth highlighting in terms of limitations. One is the role of data. So I've given it a lot of data, and we've seen the limitations in terms of the data it has and the data it has on me. It's worth knowing before you go any further that there is a setting in ChatGPT under settings called data controls, and it's called chat history and training. Why does that exist? That exists because every time that you put in a conversation into ChatGPT with this button not ticked on, that data will be stored by OpenAI, who make ChatGPT. They will use it in future to give answers to other people. It means that your data, if you pass on private data, could be used in an answer to someone else. So it will no longer be private. So data privacy is really important in terms of limitation. You need to turn that button off if you do not want it to remember. Another thing that we haven't seen in action, but is worth knowing, is that it has a 2021 data cutoff. What do I mean by that? I mean that it was trained on data on a whole load of text, and its corpus was trained in 2021. Nothing that has happened since 2021, it is certain it will know about necessarily. It may have it because other people have included it in chat, but it won't know about it necessarily. We've seen that it has no internet access. However, there are ways to give it internet access now, but as a default, it doesn't have internet access, and the free version does not have internet access. And finally, it is very eager to please, and it will make stuff up, which also puts us into an area of risk and concerns, which is it can create misinformation, it can create false information and reputational risk for you as individual scientists, but also for your organizations, and credibility risks. So even from a very short conversation, we have seen a number of different challenges that ChatGPT brings. But let's move on and let's start thinking about some of the ways it can help us. I'm going to suggest we start by going back to ChatGPT, just ChatGPT this time, and let's do something different now. Let's ask it to give us some definitions. We need to understand the world of ChatGPT and the world that ChatGPT exists in. So what I'm going to ask it to, the first thing we need to do to ensure the audience are with us is introduce some core definitions and concepts. AI, artificial intelligence, generative AI, LLMs, large language models, GPT, and OpenAI. As the audience has people with different levels of knowledge and who may not have English as their first language, could you develop a table? I'm being very specific about what I want it to develop, with the term, definition, and make this brief, and an analogy for this term. So here's the table. So artificial intelligence, the simulation of human intelligence by machines. And that is like a virtual assistant that can understand and complete tasks for you, just like a human assistant would. Generative AI is a subset of AI. It focuses on creating and generating new content. ChatGPT is a form of generative AI. This can be text, images, and music. It's like an artist that can paint original artworks, compose unique melodies, or write stories that have never been seen before. A large language model is a computational model that processes and understands human language. And it's specifically around text for translation, for summarization, and more. It's like a language wizard. GPT is a type of LLM. So when you're using ChatGPT, you're using a type of language model. It's one of many language models, and it's specifically developed by a company called OpenAI, which is your final one. So one thing that's interesting here is that actually all of these analogies are very different to the last one. Last time I asked the same question. So, sorry, that's wrong thing. Copy this one. The other day I did the same exercise with you and the analogies were different. Why is that? As an AI language model, my responses are generated based on a mixture of licensed data, data created by human trainers, and publicly available data. I do not have direct control of the specific analogies. The analogies I generate are influenced by patterns and information present in the data. And importantly, he doesn't actually say this, but Importantly, there's a random element. ChatGPT will never give you the same information twice, because every time it responds, there is a random token that is changing its response in some way. That said, if you've given the same context and asked the same question, it will likely give you the same basic answer, but the way it does it, the way it produces it, will be different each time. So you might want to know as well where ChatGPT and generative AI came from. So let's ask ChatGPT to help us. Gosh, why does it keep on copying the wrong things? Sorry about that. Would you give me a brief 200-word or less overview of the history that led to generative AI in the style of a Donald Trump speech? And let's see what ChatGPT has to say about that. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you about the incredible history of generative AI. It's tremendous, believe me. Back in the day, we had these brilliant minds, absolute geniuses, who wanted machines to do more than just calculations. They dreamed of creating artificial intelligence that could generate its own content. It was a vision like no other. Okay, so you're seeing here a few different things. Firstly, you're seeing that it can simulate different people. It can simulate speech of people in its corpus of text. It can tackle any subject, more or less, and connect different, completely unrelated things. You are very unlikely ever to get Donald Trump to say something about generative AI in this style, but it can connect two completely different things in one, because it's all about how it connects language. And that it can be quite creative in that, which is an unusual thing that people didn't really expect from computers to be able to do, and artificial intelligence to do. So I'm going to move on now and just do one more round of analysis on what we're seeing. Just pick up some other points about what we're seeing here. So let me get Mural up again, and let me get ChatGPT up again. And let's just add some of the extra lessons that we've learned. Firstly, we've learned artificial intelligence is the idea of emulating human intelligence, and generative artificial intelligence is the idea of artificial intelligence that is not about analyzing numbers or analyzing patterns. It's actually about analyzing patterns to create new things. Then you have large language models, which are a particular background for things like ChatGPT. They allow generative AI of text to happen. So they look at a whole load of text. And finally, you have GPT itself, which is general purpose transformer. And that's a model of a type of large language model created by OpenAI. We've also potentially seen some extra limitations. So one thing we've seen is that there is, sorry, apologies. We haven't seen it maybe, but it's worth knowing that there is a bias in inputted information. So because a large language model and generative AI in general is trained on all of the information that it has been given, and ChatGPT talks about the kinds of information it uses, humans are inherently biased, and the content they have created over time is biased. So it will spit out those biases at you. So the bias in inputted information leads to bias in its outputs. So you will find it does things like, if you ask one of the image models for a picture of scientists, it will be white men in white coats and things like that. Another thing in terms of risks and concerns we should be aware of is copyright. So it has ingested all of this information, including copyrighted information, and therefore there are already legal cases about what is happening around that copyrighted information that it is reformatting and outputting. There's also copyright issues about the content it creates. So is this content on my screen, is that whose copyright is it? Is this Donald Trump's speech my copyright? Is it OpenAI's copyright? That is completely unclear at the moment. Another thing to be aware of is the environmental impact of ChatGPT. So in its models, by training its models, it used huge amount of power to train its models. There's also ethical considerations around the human involvement and the labor. There were people who had to look at a whole load of very distressing content to say this is the wrong type of content. So there's environmental impact, there's also ethical and labor considerations. So there's a whole load of risks and concerns that you need to be aware of if you're using ChatGPT. That said, there's a whole load of, we're going to get on to some of the ways in which it can help you. And so I'm not trying to put these out there to put you off. I just want to make sure that people, when they're using it, understand how to do it safely and what's important to do it safely. I'll stop sharing for a second. And now, for the next section, what I'm going to ask you to do, first I'm going to do one more conversation with ChatGPT, but then we're going to move on to examples. So let me just 1 second copy the next conversation. We're going to move to live examples. Let's tell ChatGPT that first so that it's ready for us. So what am I going to tell ChatGPT? I'm going to start a part of the session where we show different roles ChatGPT can take and demonstrate live examples of its usage. Before I do this, I want to feed in some background from a survey we undertook of participants before we started. In this survey, several participants shared their experience of using ChatGPT, but encountered challenges in various areas. So we had Francis and Richard, who found limitations in using ChatGPT for scientific work. It generated content that did not resonate with their voice, or it created inaccuracies in references and citations. I've explained why it would do that. So lots of inaccurate information because they were asking it to generate, to act as a search engine effectively. Barbara highlighted issues with academic writing, again, made up references. It just made up references and it was so eager to please. And Usha discovered that there were incorrect citations. Again, incorrect citations, but also it made cultural assumptions based on names. However, some other respondents shared a range of different uses and positive experiences with ChatGPT. So we have Pham, who found ChatGPT helpful in professional English, proofreading, summarizing reports, finding research papers, and various other activities. Hira utilized ChatGPT to ensure accurate English in written communications. Luz used ChatGPT for coding assistance, specifically creating and debugging Python code. Suleiman employed ChatGPT for generating research questions, searching for medicinal plants, and constructing article structures. Mario leveraged a different AI-driven code completion tool to streamline the coding process. We have Auka, who proposed an inspiring use case, suggesting ChatGPT could be used to create modern star law. And Karuna, who explored the application of AI, including ChatGPT, in differentiating white blood cells. So we've given it a whole load more information. Some of these people are attending this webinar. What 5 key pieces of advice would you have for them in using you? Please keep your advice short and to the point. Here are the advice, and hopefully this reinforces what I've already said. So first, understand the limitations. Be aware that ChatGPT might generate content that doesn't perfectly align with voice or domain requirements. Double check references, citations, information provided by ChatGPT. Provide clear instructions and prompts. Clearly specify your desired output and format in the prompt to guide ChatGPT effectively. Give it specific context and constraints to improve relevancy. Verify and validate generated content. Always review and validate the information, mitigate biases and cultural assumptions, and leverage ChatGPT for specific tasks and assistance. So utilize ChatGPT for tasks like proofreading, summarization, research paper search, coding assistance. So with that done, I'm going to launch the next poll. And the next poll is for you to decide which of these examples would you like us to see next. So we can show you live examples of using ChatGPT. Okay, so I'm looking at the poll results coming in, and we have a very clear winner in terms of rewriting an article in very complicated academic language into plain English, then translating into Spanish. And currently in second position is provide a guided learning experience on building my digital skills, and improving negotiation skills when asking manager for a salary rise is close third. So I'm going to end that poll. You can see the results very quickly. And let's get ready our the next example. So now what I'm going to do is we'll do the academic writing one, but I'm going to start a new chat. And what I'm going to do is create a new chat because this is a completely different context. This is not about the workshop. This is about an example and a specific example. So this is a closer experience to the one you'll have. The one thing I will do is do it in GPT-4, which is the more modern version of the system. The reason I'm doing that is because it's often better at reasoning. It's not that GPT 3.5 is not, it's just a slightly better version. And it's worth knowing that it is only accessible on the paid version unless you use Bing AI, where it is free. So here's my message. Act as an editor. Rewrite this text in simple to understand, plain English, readable to a person who does not have English as their first language. And what you'll see is that I actually asked ChatGPT to produce this for me the other day, is a whole load of text that is highly academic. I asked it to produce the most academic piece of writing you possibly could in whatever on whatever subject you choose in science, and it chose quantum computing. So this is the text that's going in, and what it will do now is down here give a version of it in plain English. Now, is this the same as a direct translation? No. This is not like a direct translation. There will be aspects that will be lost. However, if you are looking at text and just trying to understand the context and you want to read for speed rather than reading for 100% accuracy, then ChatGPT can do that really well. In fact, it will do it a lot better than when we see it. It'll do it a lot better if you then translate it into another language than a direct translator. So what we've got here is a piece of plain English. Quantum computing is truly changing the game, which is the version of undeniably quantum computing's transformative trajectory disrupts the deterministic modality of classical computational models. Apologies, I find it hard to read. It's just created a very simple piece of text. That is a brilliant starting point to then do this, which is translate this into Spanish. By making a two-step process of first make it plain English, then translate into Spanish, you'll have a piece of Spanish that's much easier to understand. As I said, it's not about 100% accuracy, it's about easy understanding for speakers of other languages. And so sometimes this kind of usage can be incredibly powerful for you. So as you can see, I can read Spanish, I can understand this. I think I would struggle to have understood the original translated into Spanish, just as I struggled to understand it in English. And sometimes when we're moving into sectors and areas of science that are not our own, this kind of usage would be really important. So that's example number one. Let's find another example. One of the other ones I think that you wanted was a guided learning experience on building my digital skills. Let's create a new chat for this. And I will run through the prompt. Act as a trainer, there's the role again. Focused on developing digital skills for social scientists. Develop an interactive and engaging short course for me to take over the next hour. So I'm setting some context about what I want, carried through with conversations with you. The course should, 1, include different formats, multiple choice quizzes, lectures, discussions, case studies, and other formats you think suitable. 2, aim to teach me about the key competencies relating to digital that I might need in my work, emerging technologies that I might come across, scenarios and issues that are common in social science organizations that relate to digital skills, and options that deal with these. 3, offer opportunities for reflection on current practices and skills in my organization and advice on how these might be improved. 4, be delivered in an accessible format, 1 question at a time. Often, if you ask ChatGPT to do this kind of thing and you don't specify 1 question at a time, it will give you 10 questions immediately. Stop for my answers and continue after the training after I've answered. So we've given it really clear instructions. We've given it a context. It is now developing a course for us. Welcome to the Digital Skills for Social Scientists interactive course. Over the next hour, so you can see it repeating back some of the stuff I've told it. It's heard that and it's listened. The first thing it's going to do is a lecture, it tells me. I've done this before and it started with multiple choice, it started with other things. So it will start with a lecture on data literacy, digital communication, digital research methods, digital security, and it's doing a little quiz. Did we understand it? It is a multiple choice quiz. So which of the following is not a key digital competency for social scientists? Programming in every possible language, I think, is probably the one. basic understanding is not a core digital skill. Now, some of this will be really obvious, but perhaps we picked a really obvious and simple area. You could do it for much more complicated areas, and it would potentially be very powerful there too. And it's again, using a lecture and question format for you. Let's take one more example from this group. Let us have the final one on improving negotiation skills. Okay, I'll read it through. I want to practice how to negotiate with my boss. My goal is to get a raise on my salary. You will be my negotiation feature. Role. My current role is head of department biochemistry. Context. You will simulate a detailed scenario in which I have to engage in a negotiation. Guiding. You will fill the role of the manager. I will fill the role of the employee. Again, more context. You will ask for my response in each step of the scenario and wait until you receive it. After getting my response, you'll give me details of what the other party does and says. You must grade my response and give me detailed feedback about what I need to do using the science of negotiation. We're telling it which part of its memory to access. Give me a harder scenario if I do well and an easier one if I fail. And here's a scenario. You've recently conducted an exceptional year of research and achievements. Your team has accomplished significant research advancements. You are meeting the manager at your annual performance review, and you've been asked a question by your manager. What is your response? Once you provide your response, I'll then evaluate it and we can proceed with the simulation. So what you're seeing here is not something that is necessarily a real life scenario. It's not the scenario you could put in the scenario that you're actually in, but what you're doing is you've created a context by which you can learn a skill that you may not, you can improve a skill that you have. You can put in some of the conversations that you might have in this particular context and see what it says are things you missed or things that you didn't think about. That doesn't mean that its answers are perfect, but it's a tool for reflection and thinking, accompanying you on this process. So, having done those first examples, I'm going to go to a second set of examples. Sorry, I haven't stopped the last poll, and ask you to again vote on which of these second set of examples you want to see us go through. Okay, we're good. It looks like we're getting a clear winner. I will give the poll a few more seconds while I can prepare the prompt for that winner. Okay, so I'm going to now close that poll, and I'll tell you that the winner was assisting in the formulation of a research proposal, including hypothesis generation and experiment design. So here what I'm going to do is not only introduce you to a prompt, but I'm also going to introduce you to ChatGPT plugins. So ChatGPT plugins are only available, I'm afraid, in the paid version, but there are some specific Scholar plugins. So over here, I can choose the plugins model, and I've got 3 plugins set up. One is Scholarly, which and Scholar AI, both of those search academic peer-reviewed articles, and Wolfram is a kind of computation maths data plugin. I think it'll only use one of the 2 Scholarly ones. So what is the prompt? Act as a co-designer. So this is a co-designer prompt. It's going to work with you. Specialism developing research proposals. You are working alongside me. I am a political scientist to create a research proposal titled The Impact of Social Media on Political Engagement. Below are some key aspects to use in the context. Now, this is stuff you could copy and paste from material you already had. You could copy and paste a whole load of information, but in here you've got a purpose, you've got a scope for the study, you've got evaluation criteria, and then I finish with, first, we'll work together to identify the areas to include in the research proposal. Then what might be necessary to include in each of those areas? What other work do you suggest we might undertake? And I don't think at this point, I'm not sure, but I think it might not look at Scholar, it might not use Scholar AI because I haven't asked it yet to look at Scholar AI. So it's now responding to that first question. It's just telling me about the research proposal. So what we might do now is it's indicated in the literature review section. or that there would be a literature review. So once it's finished writing, I might suggest that it could identify some key texts that we could include in our literature review. I'll start writing that. Can you identify some key texts that might be relevant to include in our literature review? I probably need to wait for it to finish because so far it's just given me a format for the proposal, but it might ask me a question now. No, okay, it hasn't. So let's see what happens now. I imagine now it will use Scholar AI, yes, or Scholarly. So now what it's doing is it's invoking Scholarly to do a search of the Scholarly databases and find. This is when you start having it as a search engine. This is where the combination of AI and search engine could be useful. And this whole conversation can take in some of the information from that paper. So you can now start refer to the literature review and the research proposal you're creating, but also to some of the things that are in these papers. So as you can see, it's finding papers about social media and politics, exactly what you'd expect. So just aware of time, I'm going to launch a final question around the final example that we should show before we go to Q&A. Okay, so we've not got a clear winner in this one. Maybe potential risks and ethical. No, let's see. There's no clear winner. I'll give it a couple more. Okay, I think we have a tie. So we have a three-way tie. I'll try and get through two very quickly. So we have evaluating the potential risks and ethical considerations associated with a proposed research study and identifying case studies for a complex scientific problem and create a personal marketing plan all had about 20%. So let's take one of those to start with. And sorry, just get the here is an example for evaluating a potential risks and ethical considerations with a research study. So I said, act as a risk assessor. I'm developing a research program. It's titled, again, I asked ChatGPT to make up a few days ago, and it explains it. So what I've asked it to do is develop a table outlining risks, the reasoning for those risks, the level of impact, their likelihood, and suggested mitigation activities. So again, being very specific, I wanted to develop what is effectively a risk mitigation table. I do have the plugins set up, so I'm not entirely sure whether it'll use it or not. It'll be interesting to see whether it does. At the moment, it's just thinking about it. So let's leave it to think and see what it, oh, okay. So it tried to look up Wolfram and that didn't work. What I might do just in the interest of time is to turn off plugins because I think it should be capable of doing something on this without looking at Wolfram. Obviously, if you provided it a whole load of context about your study, it could do this based on the information you've already provided. That's something I haven't done here. So it's identified privacy violations, informed consent as a risk, discrimination as a risk, and it will continue to identify other risks. One more, while it's doing that, I'll give you, sorry, I'm going to let that, I'm going to stop that going and give you one more because I'm aware we need to move on to the Q&A. Here's a final one. Act as a science communicator. In 1 month, a new article I've written in Science is published. The article has a title, Cognitive Horizons, Unleashing the Synergy of AI and Digital Technologies. I'll include an abstract below. Please develop a personal communications plan in a table format for me, using the 4Ms framework as columns and adding a column for timing. The aim is to help me publicize this paper and increase its impact. And then there's the abstract. What I'm trying to show here, I think what you'll get is a relatively generic communications plan. What I'm trying to show here with this example is not that it is perfect in its output. You could have a conversation with it and improve its output. say, could you add this in? Oh, no, I don't have a Twitter and you've suggested Twitter. Can you remove that? But the main thing it can do in this kind of case is it can create something that fills a blank page for you if it works, which it's not currently doing. Going a bit slow. We'll leave it while I continue talking. One of the main uses I have of ChatGPT is filling a blank page, getting the starting point. It's got a network error. Let's see if we try again. And if not, I'll try in ChatGPT 3.5. There we go. It's finally doing it. Here, it's giving you some text, some potential, probably this is a tweet, maybe on, yeah, it's giving you some ideas of potential tweets and so on. There will be lots of ways in which you can improve this output in conversation or with your own work. But the key is that it has created the starting point that you could then copy into Word or into whatever you use to then have a conversation with it. So I just wanted to finish by showing you a little bit of what's coming. And as I said earlier, one of the things that's coming is that generative AI is going to start being included in Word and in Google Docs and so on, and that's going to and in PowerPoint and so on, and that's going to change a lot of what you do. So I've got this and the way you do things. One of the things that I've got is a tool called Notion, and Notion already has an AI function. So I've created a document that has a bit of what we put in that colored mural earlier. I'm going to ask it to take that information and make it longer, add extra detail to it. And so here you can see that at the top, it started with definitions AI. Down here, it's got definitions artificial intelligence refers to the ability. So a whole load of extra functionality is coming soon. That will then, if I just show you here, become available in Windows. So here's the announcement of Windows 11. And I want to show you a few different things on it. So firstly, it'll have Copilot. This is going to be tested soon. And so this will be ChatGPT in your Windows or every day, integrated right into your Windows. Now, you can do all sorts of things, but I wanted to show one specific usage. Adding a document and clicking summarize, or responding to your, no, that's it, creating images directly within Windows, or sending it to Teams within Windows. There's a whole heap of things that will be happening directly within Windows. Now, just to finish off, I'm going to copy this. In the background, Notion has been creating a new version of the text that adds a lot more detail to what I had in here. These are all the notes of different things you can do with ChatGPT and the concerns. I'm going to show you what you can already do using generative AI in terms of creating things together. This is automatic creation based on notes of a PowerPoint, or not a PowerPoint, but a slide system. This is a tool called gamma.ai. And what we're going to do is create from those notes. So that was just a set of bullet points I passed on. It will create the takeaway that you will all be sent after this session. So here you see it's called text to deck, it's gamma.app, and it's just starting. If you, in a second, when it starts going, you'll see it's magic. It actually is magic. Here is, it's found an image, it's creating text, it's starting to lay it all out, putting in different roles of ChatGPT that I'd pass it on, creating the prompts. This is creating immediately within seconds a PDF that you could all you will all take away. So I'll leave it to continue working on that. I just wanted to point out that that is the kind of usage that you'll be able to make of generative AI, or you can already make now in terms of building slide decks, building other things, and that's coming to PowerPoint very, very soon too. So what we're seeing is a real change in how quickly content will be created and how you can create some of the kind of core outputs that you have to create on a regular basis, and not worry about the design anymore, but worry about the content, worry about getting it right. Talk to ChatGPT about what's the best way to phrase this, how's the best way to present this, help me, here's the content, help me write the speech. All of those kinds of things are going to be key. Thank you so much for coming along. Thank you so much for your votes, and you will be sent all of the different things that were in the votes. You'll be sent so you can actually go away and do it. I'm just going to add one final poll, if that's okay, which is to see whether this has inspired you to experiment anymore with ChatGPT. So just so that you know, I don't think it shows for you, but we've got about 90% saying yes, definitely, 9–10% saying probably, but I'm still not sure, and 1% saying no, I don't think it has value for me. So thank you so much for coming along. Thank you so much for your participation, and as everything will be sent to you, so you should be able to access everything. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. I'm there. You'll get in the LinkedIn in the follow-up email. So thank you very much.